Welcome, beautiful people, and thank you so much for joining us for another session of this very special event, The Sacred Wound as a Portal to Your Awakening, Embracing the Dark Night of the Soul. My name is Charlie Giles, and I am honoured and thrilled to be your host for this powerful teaching and wisdom sharing event. Today's session, we are talking to a very special soul and someone who I have worked with personally on my healing journey, the beautiful cat Courtney. We will be talking about why a dark night on plant medicines is an incredible gift, which is very excited about. Let me tell you a little bit about Kat. Kat Courtney is a pioneer in the plant medicine space. She is a traditionally trained ayahuasquera with 2 decades of experience. She authored Plant Medicine Mystery School Volume 1, The Superhero Healing Powers of Psychotropic Plants, a book about the sentient personalities of the entheogens. Kat is the co-founder, CEO of Plant Medicine People, a company dedicated to cultivating sacred relationships between people and plants. A trailblazer in psychedelic integration, Kat launched a coaching practice for ceremony aftermath over a decade ago. She is a certified death doula and has spent her adult life cultivating a bonded and trusting relationship with the darkness. I have to say that last line, when I was reading it last night, I was like, that is my new life goal. Life cultivating a bonded and trusting relationship with the darkness. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for wanting to talk about the darkness and honor it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm thinking perhaps because we both want to dive into the darkness conversation, that maybe we just, for those people who are perhaps they've heard of ayahuasca, they're thinking about plant medicine, they know they need something, and they've perhaps, heard of the different stories. So maybe just a little bit of an overview. I know that's a big topic in itself, but maybe just a bit of an overview for those people of, what are we really talking about here?
Yeah, well, ayahuasca and plant medicines like her have been used for thousands of years by indigenous people. I would say fundamentally to remember and experience our connection to nature and to all that is, because I think the core wound that most of us are experiencing in some shape or form is being disconnected from ourselves, each other, and nature. And so plant medicines in a general way, they give us this very tangible remembrance of of course, I'm connected to all that is and who we are in a greater story as souls, as beings, rather than just the individual human part. And so because of that, they're profoundly healing, helping us with trauma and all of the crazy things that we go through in our lives. And so, this is the path by which I not only discovered as a vocation, but it saved my life. I was spiraling in darkness and all kinds of traumas. And this is the path that brought me home to learning how to be my own healer, which is what they do too. It's all about empowerment and awareness with these incredible medicines. But, as we're going to talk about, they can sure as heck facilitate a dark night of the soul.
So I guess that then the next best question is, well, what is a dark night of the soul? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Great question. It's not necessarily appropriately named because it might not just be a night. A dark night of the soul can last a lifetime, actually, which I like that it emphasizes the soul in the definition of it, because the soul is has a much longer spectrum of experience than one lifetime. So even though we think of a dark night of the soul could last a lifetime, and that sounds horrifying, and it certainly isn't easy, it's one tiny pixel in the story of each of our souls. And so a dark night is essentially a night or a lifetime or somewhere in between in relationship with what we call the darkness, difficulty, suffering, pain, all of those things that happen in the intensity of contraction. And I think we emphasize that it's soulful because it's deeply felt. It isn't just a string of bad circumstances, so to speak, but it's and it could not even have anything to do with our circumstances. Sometimes our circumstances are great, but we are in a dark night of the soul because it's where the soul goes in that contraction to learn, to expand. But we call it that because it's hard as hell.
And I think that's for some people, they, obviously the name in itself can sound a bit scary, but it's I guess from that space of where it's hard as hell, how do we then, what's the transformation from that? How do we then come to the place where we're looking at it as a gift?
Oh, it's so hard to do. And yet what you're describing, looking at it as a gift, is kind of the fundamental way we start to move through it, that we actually get to a place that doesn't feel like we're in that contraction the whole time. Because I love the word contraction, by the way. It's like, we go in and it's this tightness. And when that emotion of darkness comes in, if we contract along with it, we actually elongate our period of time in it because we're sort of supporting it. However, ayahuasca likes to remind me that contraction is what we call it when a woman gives birth. She bears down and it's painful and it's messy, but it's what brings new life in. I think the fundamental key to working with any level of darkness, physical, emotional, spiritual, etc., is trusting it. A woman can trust that what she's going through and giving birth is completely safe and okay because she's giving birth. Like, she knows it, right? There's this awareness that this is to bring a life into the world. If we can remember that as individuals, when we go through a dark night of the soul, that we are giving birth to the new version of ourselves. We are not being tortured. We can trust it. We can lean in and be like, okay, this is hard, but how do I work with this? Because something amazing is being birthed always. That trust makes or breaks the length of the experience, as well as just our own, relationship with it. It can take hell and at least make it slightly bearable because we're like, well, I trust this. There's something amazing happening here.
Yeah, I absolutely am resonating so much with what you're saying. And it's taking me back to my own versions of those walking through hell experiences. I went into it without having an awful lot of knowledge, certainly not being able to listen to any of these kinds of information. But I think what you were saying there, the part that resonates the most is that understanding that, like with birth, there's a baby, like there's this amazing thing afterwards. And that's where some people get lost in the process. I've heard a lot of people who have experiences and they might be a plant medicine ceremony and it might be a dark experience and they're like, that's it, I'm out. They haven't had the support, things like that. I guess what would you perhaps say to people that have had those kinds of experience or heard of people that have had those kinds of experiences?
Yeah, it breaks my heart when somebody has a tough go of it and sort of blames the medicine or the space and is like, I'm done, because they can sort of freeze, almost pressing pause in the experience of the dark night and deny themselves the opportunity to move through it with support. It doesn't have to be done with plant medicine necessarily, but when we other it, when we blame anything externally, including ourselves, by the way, it's never our fault that these things happen. But when we other it, without taking the accountability from that place of trust of like, this is happening for me, then we just kind of, again, resist the lessons and the teachings of the dark night. So, to those people that have pressed pause on investigating the dark night of the soul because of something that's happened, it's like, get some support, get a different perspective, get people to ask you questions like, why is this for you? And because as we start to realize the potential benefits, we can say yes to the experience more. And one of the best ways to do this, by the way, is to look back in our lives at the dark nights we've already been through and go, all right, why did that have to happen? Because it's always there, the silver lining. And it's easy to do that with things that have closure, right? That feel like they're behind us. It's like, oh, my dad died actually this day 17 years ago. 17 years, something like that. Yeah. And that's far enough away that dark night is healed. So I can remember things like that when the new dark night of the soul comes in, and remember there's always a silver lining. There's always reasons for it. And it's back to that relationship of trust, of like not to other it, because then that just kind of, the contraction elongates the experience.
So I guess going down that same path, what kind of tips or advice would you give to someone who's like right in the middle of it?
My kitty is walking up right now. So like having unconditional love around doesn't suck, that incredible light. But, first and foremost, we got to be super good to ourselves. Because if you were to ask me what's the thing that makes it worse, and not just the relationship with trust, it's being unkind to ourselves, like punishing ourselves for it. I've done something wrong. I like to remind all of us that there's two lies that the darkness tells us when we go into it. Number one, that it's permanent. You're stuck here, never getting out of this. Energy is always in motion. It is never true that we're stuck in any state of consciousness. It's just the darkness is really, really seductive and makes us think that. I like the Winston Churchill quote that if you're going through hell, just keep going. You gotta get through it. And that alone brings light, right? The reminder of like, this too shall pass. I got this, okay? And the second lie the darkness likes to tell us is that it's our fault, that we're broken, we did something wrong. We're the only ones to experience that. Also, never, ever true. So if we can remember those two things and treat ourselves with kindness and nurturing as we're going through it, that's the number one thing to support, because we can't force getting to the other side of it any faster than is necessary in terms of the experience. But we can love ourselves through it. You know, the thing that usually happens when we go through these periods is we stop showing up for ourselves in self-care. We don't do the things because we're tired and it's painful and we're just like that heaviness. That's when it matters the most. Move your body, say the kind things with your internal voice, show up for yourself. That makes all the difference in how we work with it. Even though I know it's harder in those states, it's crucial or it just gets stuck.
Absolutely. And I do remember times when it's just so hard. And that first initial thing to beat up on yourself, and it just keeps you down. But I guess even as you're saying, the things that I've learned is it doesn't have to be a huge step forward either. It can just be a small thing, even if it's just getting out of bed and having a shower. That can be huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I consider everything that we do for self-care, it's like money in spirit bank. Everything matters. And I'll add one more thing with this that ayahuasca taught me. If we can add the intention around each of the little things that we do, taking a shower, brushing our teeth, the intention is to myself with love. You know, like I'm doing this because I love myself. That takes the simple thing like a shower and makes it more meaningful. You know, before you step into the shower of like, I love myself. I'm going to do this, cleanse my body. That is light and love that helps us move through these dark periods faster. And it's so simple. It doesn't take more time out of our day. It just takes awareness.
I guess there's another big question which comes after our, plant medicine journeys, and however many they may be, because as you said, it's not necessarily just one night. This could be quite an experience, ongoing experience. But integration. So I want to talk about integration because it's so important. And I think it's such a misunderstood concept of the plant medicine world.
Misunderstood and disrespected in terms of the importance of it. I mean, it is the most important part of the work that we do, spiritually speaking, not just with plant medicine, across the board, because whether it's a dark night or the best night of our lives, if we don't integrate it, we're not walking in the wisdom and the profundity of what that experience taught, which means we will perpetually have to repeat it. So because we didn't take the lessons and integrate them into our lives, well, then we got to learn it again, which is fine. We're humans. Most of us have to learn things many, many times before it clicks, which is okay. But that's why integration is so important, is it can take an experience that will otherwise remain mental and embody it. And the core of integration is in the word that I just said. It's somatic, it's embodiment. If we aren't bringing it in to our physical beings on a cellular level and walking in this wisdom in the world, then it's not integrated. It stays up here.
So, because this is a very interesting part, I think, when I've spoken to people about their journeys, and they get kind of addicted to the journey part, and then, go back to normal in the in-between part. And they think, oh, well, I've got to go back and do another journey or do another experience, to kind of, so I guess that's what you're saying with this integration. What might that look like? especially coming out of a dark night of the soul? I know that's a big question too. But...
Oh, I love it though, because what you're describing around those of us, I've done this, so I have no judgment of this, where we're going to the next ceremony again and again to try to crack the code. Ayahuasca has a really funny expression about that. She calls it doing your homework on the teacher's desk. Like, now go do your homework and then come back and let's see where you're at. And why that's really relevant to dark nights in particular is, let's say we have a really hard journey with a plant medicine like ayahuasca. If we don't do the integration, the homework, because there's always homework of like, okay, what is this pain point? Usually it's stuff we know we're supposed to do, like move our bodies, meditate, treat ourselves with love. If we don't do that in the integration and come back to work with the medicine, they're going to have to show us the ramifications of this kind of behavior in a more dramatic way. And so guess what? The dark night gets darker. Because it's got to get our attention. So there's a reason, a beautiful motivation for integration is like, so that I can have a different experience the next time I go. We can't guarantee it won't be another dark night, but maybe it'll be about something different that we get to learn about instead of repeating of like, oh yeah, I forgot, So what are the things that we do? We do the homework that our intuition knows is important regarding how we treat ourselves, how we treat each other. And again, it really normally is stuff that is like, yeah, of course, like you're probably not going to be earth shattering in the reflection. It's just the fact that we're not doing it, or we're doing something that is self-destructive. Like it took me years to heal bulimia, years, because it was so ingrained in me, the self-abuse. So yeah, the medicine had to really get my attention around how urgent it was becoming to address it. But it takes what it takes. But that said, the time in between the journeys is the most important time, because that's when we can do our homework and then come back to the teacher and be like, how am I doing? And get new information.
I love that. And I'm totally resonating with everything you're saying. It is like the boring homework stuff in the middle that you try and skip and like, really, do we have to do this? And exactly, you're waiting for that amazing, what is my huge thing that I have to do that's so exciting that's going to change my life? And it's like, eat better, exercise. Like, oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And those things, because we do them every day, make all the difference in the world, right? But it doesn't feel like the big aha of like, oh, if I just say the alphabet backwards 4 times, everything changes. It's just, no, it's everyday things and how we show up for ourselves that changes everything. So that's why the integration is everything. We get the insight, then we got to do it.
Yes, absolutely. I want to kind of go, now that we've kind of walked through the process a little, I'm wondering if some people who are thinking, well, what if I don't go through this process? What does life look like for me? I might be being called to do something, but what if I just avoid this whole dark night of the soul kind of thing? What could that look like?
Well, good luck is all I got to say to that. But I want to give 4 categories of how the dark night comes in, actually, because chemical is one, plant medicine or psychedelics, whatnot. But that's only one category. Dark night's going to find us one way or another. So chemical and clinical. Here's another example. Clinical is near-death experience. We drive our car into a wall. We have a heart attack. Like we get face to face with our mortality. That can totally bring in a dark night of the soul of like, the big existential things, because we're never going to avoid it because we all get to die. So it's coming one way or another, right? Third category is crisis. We've been in one for 3+ years globally. That intense experience of pressure cooker energy. We've all been facing a dark night in one way or another when COVID hit. So good luck avoiding that, right? Like pretending everything's fine. No, we're in a global shadow experience, which is amazing and difficult at the same time. And then the fourth one is what I call cultural. So cultural follows every spiritual tradition that exists in terms of intentionally doing things, everything from yoga to meditation to you name it, in order to expand consciousness. the tricky part about, a chemical and cultural, those are the things that we choose to do, right? Because we want to expand, we want to know more. But when we do that, we go in both directions in duality. We don't just get to expand more into happiness and yumminess and like love, we expand more into the darkness too. So those things, even though it comes from a place of wanting to heal and be more awake, can facilitate a dark night because it's going to take us deeper into our relationship with the darkness. So we all have these, whether we like it or not. You might try to avoid the two that are intentional, but the other two are going to find us because the soul wants to grow. And this is one of the ways that we do it.
Yes, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm also thinking about this term, the darkness. So I guess for some people, we all have very many different ideas of what that means, depending on how we were raised, what religion. Could you kind of speak a little bit broadly around darkness when it comes to what experiences we have with plant medicine as well?
That's a great question because the darkness gets a bad rap. It does. The darkness gets a bad rap because it's the place where we associate all things that are difficult, all of the emotions that are painful, etc. But I mean, I absolutely love a night where the moon is new and not even visible, and the darkness can feel safe. It can feel like the womb. We come from the darkness. We live in the womb for 9 months and then come into the world, and it was safe in there for most of us. So the darkness, it really just holds the potential for all life and experiences. It isn't evil. Darkness itself, that's why I like darkness instead of evil. Darkness just is a space without light, but holds the potential for everything. And so I love Carl Jung, who's, essentially the godfather of shadow work, because he emphasized that in our own darkness, our own shadow also lives the potential for everything that we can be. So in the darkness is where we also can discover our superpowers, how amazing, powerful, gifted we are. So darkness is not the bad guy. It's just the place of challenge and intensity. But there's so much goodness that we discover when we go there.
I love that. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful expression of darkness. Yeah. And I've been learning myself, as I've mentioned, this kind of relationship with darkness. I think what happens too is that the less you tend to fear it, right? Because the fear is what actually makes it bigger and scarier, because you're taught. I mean, even at a young age, I remember being scared of the dark. But then realizing that if you turn the light on, the room is exactly the same, right? But yeah, just having that relationship with darkness and understanding that about yourself as well. Like, what is it that you keep in the dark about yourself, that you fear unnecessarily because of what's there? So I love that. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if as a kind of an overview of what we've talked about, as far as the contemplation of, as you said, we can't avoid the dark night of the soul, right? Or however many nights. It's going to happen in whatever way, but whether you're trying to avoid it or not, it's going to happen. So as an overview, I guess, for people who are, perhaps they're knowing that something's coming, or whether they should step into it, or maybe they're in the middle of it, what kind of, I guess, advice and help and support could you offer them in this next part of the process, to where they need to go, to going through it and beyond?
Reminder of the two lies and trusting it. A lot of the resistance. So I love that you brought in the fear that comes in, because fear is resistance, right? And we are afraid of what we don't know. That it's usually a relationship with the unknown that creates that fear. So, I mentioned earlier, just this whole practice of remembering when we've been in a similar space of, I'm scared, this is intense. And then we learned and moved through it, like that this is just the pattern, right? And giving ourselves, because our minds are the pieces that resist and have fear. And if the mind, I think of it sometimes as a court case, that I'm playing out up there to my mind of like, here's evidence that you've been through things before and you're still here. Everything's okay. In fact, you're better for it. And sometimes it's like, yeah. But fundamentally, I think that resistance comes in because most of us are not taught that it's safe to feel our emotions. And again, we got to come somatically to our bodies. And so having tools, being curious about, because there's endless amounts of tools that support us in being grounded and feeling safe to feel fear, anger, sadness, you name it. Tools very personal to us. I mean, I could share my tools, but they might be meaningful or meaningless to each individual. It's like we got to do the work of finding what helps us to feel safe, because safety eradicates fear. Like, okay, I'm safe, I can do this, and I'm sitting at my altar where I have tons of tools that support me in this process. And I had a dark night last week, actually. I had multiple days of super intense emotional processing. And I was at this altar asking for help from my plants and my spiritual team of like, I need help. It's my turn. And receiving that, having relationships with plants, spirit guides, crystals, breathing exercises, like whatever it is, because I think the inclination when things get rough is we contract and white knuckle. Well, it will eventually pass, but that is the least useful thing we can do. It's like, I can't wait for this to be over. Help ourselves. And to develop relationships with tools when we're not in a dark night is the most powerful thing we can do. So they're there for us when we need them. When the shit hits the fan, we're like, no. But that's part of self-discovery, is finding the things that help us feel safe to feel these emotions, because the only way out is through, right? We have to feel. Now, that's the other piece of the dark night. You stay disassociated, you stay mental, and it may pass, but it's going to come back, because it's about feeling and processing the wisdom of that. So whatever we can support ourselves in that is golden.
I want to also give you some space to talk about some of your own things that you might have coming up, if you have any programs or retreats coming up. But you also have a free gift that you wanted to offer everyone who is watching as well. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the free gift is directly aligned with what you were talking about. I'm going to share some of my processes and give just additional tools, basically, because like I said, it's very personal. But because I've worked with ayahuasca for so long, I've gone through so many dark nights. I've intentionally done this, and I just want to share a bunch of different ideas for people that may or may not resonate, but that can get inspiration and motivation going. And so that is in video form. And yeah, it's like, the tools to get through a dark night of the soul. Regarding the stuff that is I do in my world, retreats with my company, Plant Medicine People. We do 3 or 4 retreats with plant medicines in legal spaces. But I also do courses around plant medicine, working with spirit. But every season, I do either the equinox or the solstice celebration. And every season, I honor one of the dark emotions, if you will: shame, grief, anger, fear. And so I do online remote sacred ceremonies around like creating a safe container and allowing us to basically alchemize some of these emotions and energies and move through from shame into empowerment, as an example. So I'm always having those things on my schedule, because it's just always important to give ourselves proactive opportunities to get to not only feel these emotions, but be seen. It's really important to have witnesses sometimes, right? Like people that are like, we're in this together. And remember that lie the darkness tells us, is it's only us, it's only us. It's never true. And so to get to do this kind of work with people, either in person or remotely, it just amplifies it, I think, all the more. So thank you for asking.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I just wanted to, I've obviously done some things with you online as well, which were just fantastic and helpful, but also to say to people that it's amazing what you can do online now, right? So I think one of the gifts that have come out of COVID is to help people become, aware of how we can do things online as well. So they're a little bit more used to doing those kinds of things. But the fact that these programs that you have, with energy, it's fantastic. You don't lose any of that, do you?
really don't. And again, I mean, it's what the plants teach us anyway, how we're all interconnected. That time and space are just these mental constructs that are not nearly as important as we think they are. So I am continuously blown away by the depth of the healing and magic that happens just in a remote container too. I wasn't so sure of it before COVID. And now I'm like, oh yeah, doesn't matter. We can do it side by side or in different countries. It's all good.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. Okay, so I guess, so I wanted to make sure that your free gift, which sounds awesome, and I wish that I had have had access to it when I needed it, will be available in the links and everything underneath this recording. Your website is plantmedicinepeople.com. Is that?
You got it? Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure I verbalize it too, because sometimes, if we don't write it or if someone hasn't got it there, please sign up to the newsletter as well, because that's very handy. I've had some great resources from there, and I love watching you on Instagram. Kat does some great lives as well. So yeah, I'm a bit of a fan.
Thank you, Charlie.
Pass it on. Was there anything that you just wanted to say in closing?
Just giving deep compassion and love for all of our fellow brothers and sisters that are in the process of a deep, dark night. And I love having this discussion because it just normalizes it. Just an opportunity to remember everybody goes through these, everything's okay. But compassion is such a force, and just like my heart is with everyone in a space of suffering. Even though I trust the suffering, I know how hard it is to navigate. So just letting people know they're not alone and they matter, and it's going to be okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kat. I really appreciate your time. It's been
Thanks
fabulous.
for having me. Yeah, thank you so much.